Hello and welcome to the Zwift Race Place. I'm Cade Fravel, and today we have two pro commentators on the mic with me, Zoe Langham and Adam Thorpe. Zoe, you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then Adam, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Zoe, the Women's Elite Rider. Regarded.
Okay, Adam, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I'm Adam. I'm one of the Premier League men's riders for Wahoo Le Col. Fairly new to the team, but yeah, been racing for about 2 years now and getting quite into it. So trying to work out the tactical nuances of this course and hopefully share some light with you guys today.
Okay, perfect. We're excited to hear what you have to say. I wanted to start out real quick with some basic info from the course. For you guys who aren't seeing the stream right now, we have an elevation profile up. Today's course is going to be 7.1 kilometers or 4.4 miles per lap. The A's and B's will be doing 6 laps on this course, and I believe the Premier Division as well. And then Cat C and D will be doing 3 laps, which I think works out to about 22 kilometers. And then the elevation profile for this one, 73 meters or 240 feet per lap. And this is, of course, the Two Bridges Loop in Watopia. You guys have anything else to add just about the course, things you should know before we jump in with the race?
I think it's an interesting course in that you've got lots of sections of recovery and lots of sections of full gas. I think that's what's really going to define this week's race. So it's going to be tough, it's going to be long, but it will be all about using your energy at the right place.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of an FTP riders course again, just being able to kind of keep going over a lot more laps and kilometers than we used to. Definitely felt it last week with the kind of 40-kilometer race on the Tuesday. So I'm expecting this one to hurt more than perhaps you might expect.
I guess that will also be potentially different as well for the C's and D's, where they're looking at a shorter race. They could be seeing the sprinters and the sort of 1 minute riders coming to the fore.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the A's and B's, seeing the FP riders sort of staying strong towards the end. The sort of fatigue catches up with you.
I think I expect that C and D riders race to be really absolutely kind of hard pace from the start and all in the whole way round, really.
All right. So we're in with the riders on course now, and I wanted to start out today by asking you guys how you think this one will differ from the figure 8 course that we did a little while back in the season, because it's a little different, but this early part of the course especially is very similar. Adam, maybe do you want to start us off with this?
I think this week will be more about really focusing on your own individual timing. If you do your research on this course, it will really pay dividends because you've got this one segment which you're going to repeat over and over and over again. And if you can really nail your time, I think that'll be what makes a good race or a bad race. Really. Whereas figure 8 had so many different parts to it, and the hill was quite a bit harder, I would say. So it was really about if you could even stick in on that hill and stay with the group, because in some of the races I was watching figure 8, we were seeing the group really, really split up. And I don't think it quite be the case if...
I'm gonna interrupt you here real quick because it sounds like, do you have a fan on or something? There's a little bit of static in the background.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's me or not. But...
Oh, I don't know. Just...
Is it stopped now? I can't hear anything.
It stopped now. Okay. Perfect.
Do you want to go again?
Yep, you can continue.
Yeah, so like I say, I think it's going to be about learning your own race and your own timing for that specific intermediate sprint. As we've seen in lots of ZRLs, so many points on offer for the intermediates and not that many for the finish line. So maybe if you've got riders who are potentially in your team who are really worried about making the finish line, maybe you just use them entirely on lap 1 and 2 and 3 to just really target the sprints. And I think that'll be what's very different potentially to that figure 8 course, because figure 8 will split more naturally than this. And on this course, you can use potentially riders who aren't as confident in making it to the finish to just go all in on those first two, 3 primes or so, try and get some points on the board along with their finish point. So,
okay. Zoe, do you have anything to add to that? About?
No, I think Adam's mostly covered that there. Really, I'm slightly expecting the time to be a bit harder because you've not got that long drag at the top, which we previously had on the figure of 8. So, yeah, and then just absolutely keeping the pace on over the top, because I think particularly as a woman rider, if you don't get into that super tuck for the descent that comes pretty much straight after, then you risk losing the group.
Yeah, and that's actually something I want to talk about later in the stream, is how some of our lighter riders should handle coming over the top of the KOM there. But we've come through this intermediate already, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I know we were talking before the stream, and I wanted to hear your guys' opinion on when the fastest through time will be set. Do you think that's a first lap thing while the pack is moving pretty quickly, or can somebody hang on and try and set it later when everybody's a little bit more tired? Zoe, you want to start this time?
Yes, I think probably for the women's race, I expect that, especially by the last 3-4 laps, will be very spread out. So I think the chances of getting a first through that there are going to be pretty slim, and it's going to be more about people just sitting in, hanging on those laps, not contesting too much, because especially if there's a small group, then you know that you've got the kind of points in the bag for first few segment anyway. So I definitely am expecting it to be first and second laps that we get the most points in the women's, but this can be very different in the men's.
Yeah, I think Zoe's absolutely right there. So I think it's going to depend on group size. So in the men's races, I think there's probably more likelihood for it to stick as a bigger group. So if you've got a really good sprinter, I think they can feasibly get it on nearly every lap. I mean, obviously there's only 10 fastest times available, but if you've got a really standout sprinter, use them on that and try and focus on it, because there's a lot of points on offer. And learn how to tactically ride it to get the fastest through, maybe not first across the line. Because there is, we've used riders before in races to really just focus on getting 30 points sprint 1 and then not even worrying about the finish. I mean, 30 points is the equivalent of coming third in one of these races. So that finish, that intermediate sprint, can be really worth a lot of points. So it's really worth focusing, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the features that's really interesting about the ZRL, is the fact that you can pick up so many points on a course. Even if the course isn't designed for your rider type in terms of the finish, if you're a climber and there's a small climb on the course, even though it'll come down to a bunch sprint in the end, you can still pick up those intermediates, and vice versa if you're a sprinter on a climber's course. And I think it makes it more inclusive in the ZRL, and it also adds some interesting tactical elements to the race. We're getting on to the KOM here, and I wanted to ask you guys, how do you think the KOM will differ from the time we rode up the KOM on the figure 8 course? I think we still get a lot of the steeper sections here, but that long drag on the top is cut off. So do you think it'll be easier because it's a little shorter, or harder because riders are going to be pushing as hard as possible up these early slopes? Adam, maybe you want to start this time?
I think it will probably be harder for a few reasons, actually. I mean, when I look at a course, think about where you're going to get dropped more than where you're going to see splits, if that makes sense. So I look at the hill is where the group's going to split apart, and the descent is where the groups are going to get formed. If you're not in the group on the descent, to me, you're kind of out of the race. So, and I think that's what's really going to define this race. It's going to be about how you can position yourself over the top. Whereas on figure 8, it went on for a lot longer. So you could really just get yourself back in as the group eased off after the steep bit. So I think there'll be a really big difference between that compared to this week in figure 8. So
I know, Adam, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to talk about how the distance of this course will affect the splits, and I know you were just talking a little bit about getting dropped and splits in the field right there. So I thought maybe you wanted to jump towards that right now, and after that, I have a question for Zoe, but maybe you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from previous experience racing on this course, the size of the group is a huge factor on how the race plays out. The bigger the group, the less attacks there tends to be. It's obviously just a rough general rule, but when I've raced this course in small groups, say 10 to 20 riders, people attack in all sorts of places where you didn't really expect. Not on the climb, not on the intermediate sprint. They're just attacking on like the S's and places like after this lap banner where you've got the small climb. People are trying things, and I think as the laps go on, you get to lap 4, 5, 6, when there's maybe 10, maybe even 6 or 7 in the group, you could see people going long, and I think they could work. Like the attacks could work, especially if you've got 2 teammates feeling strong. I don't think there's any reason why they can't get a 2-up TT, because this course kind of is so much about recovery and full gas sprints that if chase doesn't work, then 2 people out front can really just go away. So I think there's a massive amount of tactical opportunities that are going to appear in the later laps, which shouldn't be missed out on if you've got maybe not the best sprinters and you've got good FTP riders.
I think that's interesting what you said about attacking from really anywhere, because I know I've raced this course before. My team does a Sunday race series, and there was one week where we did, I think it was 3 laps, but maybe 4 laps of this course. And I actually attacked on this little drag we're on right here going up into the S's, and I managed to stay away until over the KOM. I got caught before the finish, but it is possible to attack from a lot of different places on this course. And even though it's a flatter course in terms of the fact that there's no big climbs, it is definitely rolling in many places. We went over the top of the KOM there, and we saw a lot of riders super tucking on the way down. And this brings me to the next question I had. I thought, Zoe, maybe you could take this one, as I think you are a lighter rider, which was how should lighter riders be handling that descent there, and what kind of precautions do you want to take to make sure you don't get dropped?
Yeah, definitely. So I think actually for me, this is going to be one of the things I mainly focus on for this course, because I could be wasting a lot of energy on that descent just trying to stay in with a group, or if I come up over the KOM in the first couple, then I'm risking completely wasting that energy coming up first by getting either dropped or caught on the descent very easily. So I think my focus and the focus for lighter riders should be coming up over that KOM and keeping that power on until you are able to super tag on that descent. So getting up to the power needed to reach that 57, 60 kph to super tag. And then, super tag as soon as possible. And just be vigilant if there are riders starting to catch you or go past you. Make sure you're sticking in that group. I'm going to make sure that I have riders around me to go down it with that are hopefully a bit heavier, and I can sit in their draft a bit. So, yeah, I think if you're a lighter rider, that's definitely a thing to do.
I think there's even more than that potentially as well, actually, in that the real difference with this course is there's no points on that KOM. If you're a good climber, where do you get your points? Of course. Like, is it just your finish line points? Or, like, where do you get them? And I think Zoe's absolutely right. For the lighter riders, they want to split the group on this climb, but then they don't want to get dropped from the descent by a heavier rider who can maybe stick with them. So how do you pace that climb? Do you really focus on getting up front, being aggressive, or do you kind of wait for it to just thin out later on in the course? It's a real interesting dilemma, I think, that a lot of people are going to have this week. And personally, I find being aggressive on climbs like this and the leg snapper can really work, because if you're at the front of the group sort of comes through behind you and pulls you along in the draft after the top of the climb. So you can kind of get a rest almost. Whereas a lot of people, if you're at the back of the group on the climb, you're going to be nearly full gas all the way onto the descent and possibly after really, really long pace. So it's a real sort of tough one, but I think you probably would rather be at the front of the group and causing the splits than chasing them down.
I think that's interesting that you said that, and especially about how there really is no place for climbers to get points on this course unless they're making splits there. I know what I try and do often when there's a climb like this is try and pace myself like a little slower than if I was just riding to the top. I try and pace myself like a little bit past the top of the climb so that I still have enough energy to stay with the group over the top, because in past experiences, that's often where I've gotten dropped, is I've been able to push to the top as a lighter rider and a better climber, but then once we hit the descent, I just fly out the back. So I try and make sure I still have enough left in the tank to push over the top of the climb. So I think if you're going to go with the strategy of trying to make splits, I think it's important to make sure that, well, A, you have a split, and B, that you still have enough left in the tank to stay away or stick with the group over the top of the climb. We're coming up towards the KOM for the second time here, and before we finished, I wanted to talk a little bit about bike choice and power-ups. So for bike choice, I think we decided aero rules the day. I'm not sure, Adam, did you have something to mention about how the KOM might influence bike choice?
I think that more depends on your personal preference as a rider. If you know you're going to really struggle on the KOM, maybe you do want a lightweight bike. Certainly, I personally would be going for an aero bike, because I think there's so much flat on this course that it's worth it. But like certain courses where there are hills, if that's where you're worried about getting dropped, then improve your weaknesses by picking a lightweight bike. But I think for 95% of people this week, I think we're looking at an aero bike really to suit your strengths and make it easier throughout.
And for those of you who are wondering what an aero bike might be, I know Zwift Insider has done extensive research on this, so definitely check out some of their articles if you're looking for some more in-depth stuff, but just a basic rundown. Cervelo S5 is the fastest aero bike right now, I think, and then the S-Works Venge is in second slot. You can't go wrong with the Tron. Then if you're a lower level, the Canyon Aero Road might be something to consider. And then power-ups is the other key factor. And our power-ups this week are going to be Aero, Draft Van, and Feather. What are your opinions on this? Zoe, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, I think this is a massive contrast to last week, where a lot of the power-ups weren't maybe the most helpful, and kind of you really got lucky if you got a particular, if you didn't get a burrito and you didn't get if you ended up with the truck, you would an anvil. If you got the truck, you were doing well. If you got the others, you kind of had to be careful where you used them. And I think this week's a lot better in that you've got the feather, great, that helps you with this climb, obviously. And you've also got an aero. Everyone loves an aero for those intermediate sprints. And you've also got the draft. So we've actually seen in last week's race that the draft was used really effectively in the Premier League to nip past who was in first in that final sprint. And I just wonder if riders are starting to get draft rather than an aero towards that finish line, whether that's another thing to be used this week, because it seemed to be working so effectively last week.
That's interesting actually, because the finish line is kind of our next topic, and how you want to handle that. But first, Adam, do you have anything to add about power-ups? Or I think Zoe.
Yeah, Zoe's covered the vast majority on it, but there's a couple more small things which I would say, which is, when is each power-up most effective? For the intermediate sprint, the lightweight is not effective when you're coming downhill into the sprint. So if you've got a lightweight, you want to use it on the hill going into that intermediate sprint rather than during the sprint itself. It will help you to accelerate, but it will hinder you on the downhill. So think about when you're going to use that. And then the draft is most effective when the pace is hard. So if you've got a draft coming to finish, the harder that final kilometre is, the better for you, because you get 30 seconds of benefit, not 15. So you want a hard pace. If you can, manipulate the group to increase the speed by maybe a smaller tap by yourself, maybe, there's scope there to push the pace and get more out of your own power up.
Definitely, you've got that last kilometre kind of flat to really get the absolute max out of that draft, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, the aero obviously rules the day, as it always does. But there's good opportunities for all of these power-ups. So, if you get them, don't be worried. Just change the way you race based on what you've got.
Yeah, I think all three are pretty good this week, aren't they, really?
Yeah, definitely, my opinion.
Okay, perfect. I think that pretty much covers power-ups, and I do agree with you guys that the power-ups this week are much better. I think I saw some people had accidentally dropped anvils on the climb last week. I think that was a bit of a mess.
People not realizing that they could track if they got one and didn't want to use it or wanted to get a new power-up. Just remembering that track function.
I think Zwift Insider actually just came out with an article recently about, or maybe it was a video about discarding power-ups. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out. We're coming up to the finish line now, and I wanted just to talk about a little bit of basic sprint strategy. Do you guys think this is a sprint where it's better to go a little bit earlier, a little bit later, or kind of right around that sweet spot sprint mark? And I don't know. Where do you think riders should be launching their sprints? Adam, maybe you want to start this time?
I think generally 300 meters to go just before the first of the two bridges is always a good place to base it off if you've no idea what to do. But by this week, we're a few weeks in. People know who's in their division. People know who are the good sprinters. It might be Zwift, but there's an element of real life. You pick the right wheel. Pick the best sprinter's wheel, kick when they kick, and get their draft and come past it. It does work, and it does work against very, very good sprinters. So maybe use that. If the group's small, you can really manipulate yourself to get on the right wheel. So have a think about that more than just when you're going to go. Be reactive to the group.
Okay. Zoe, do you have anything to add to that?
I think, yeah, that's everything that I could have really said about that.
I think also, based on the power up you've got a aero, you maybe want to wait. And if you've got a draft, you maybe kick long the group. I know it will only give you a few seconds once you're through the group, but it's think about it. And if you've got the draft, make sure you get the full 30 seconds out of it. Don't just get 15 seconds out of it when everyone else activates the aero.
What do you think about the feather? So say you're stuck with the feather at the end. Use it, don't use it? Definitely
use it. Mm-hmm. The feather makes you more light, which makes you accelerate faster. So that's what you've got to tailor your sprint. If you've got the feather, it will really help you snap onto the right wheel. It might not help you win, but it will help you accelerate and respond very quickly if someone goes early or when it kicks. You can make sure you're on the right wheel, because obviously a delay from when you see everyone else kicking to you putting the power in and you following that wheel. So it will help with that. But yeah, definitely use it is the key, because it will make you lighter and it will make your watts per kilo higher. So.
All right, so go for the feather at the finish if you don't have any other options. I think that's something that's interesting to know, because I've questioned whether or not to use the feather at the finish before, and I think that's some good advice for people who are wondering about that. So we've completed 2 laps of the course now. I don't have anything else to really talk about. I think, Adam, maybe did you want to say something about trainer difficulty before we go?
There is potentially one thing to do with train difficulty in this course specifically, actually, and that's on the KOM. I'm not going to say it's going to define your race. Maybe worth thinking about. At the top of the crest of that hill, there's a very, very small descent, sort of only 20 meters or so. But if you're running very, very high trainer difficulty, it will take a lot of the resistance out of the trainer. And you need to be prepared for that, because if you're chasing back on and you lose all the resistance in your trainer, then you need to panic. So it's maybe worth considering that if you are running high trainer difficulty, make sure you're not right at the back of that group as you crest that lip, because it will make it more difficult for you to sprint back on when you really need to be getting back on quickly before the descent. So nothing too drastic.
I might just add as well, we've just come through a very rolling section, and you can see on that, if you're starting to tire, then it's literally just going up and down and up and down. And what you should be doing there is kicking at the bottom of those downhills, and that will sail you up those uphills, and you won't feel such a you won't have to put so much work in to getting you up and over those little bridges before you go back down again. So that's just a little tip to start thinking about, maybe particularly if you're really quite tired and you're struggling to hang on to that group.
Just out of curiosity, and if this is too secret, you guys don't have to share, but what do you guys use for your trainer difficulty? Maybe Zoe, you can start, and then Adam.
So I stick with 50% because particularly if we are anyone looking to go into the Premier League, you will have to use 50%. So I don't do it more, not so much through tactics, but just to get used to it, that I'm not going to have a choice about that. So that's kind of where I'm not very tactical.
I'm currently the same, because I'm Premier League. I've moved 50% from 10 to 20. I used to always run with a wheel-on trainer and power meter pedals, so I was always 0. And I didn't like that much, because when the pace goes up, it's always up the hills, so you want a bit extra resistance. And I've very quickly adapted to 50% train difficulty, actually, because when it's putting more resistance in the trainer, it's exactly when you want it. So it's been easy to react to. We have a lot of people within Wahoo that still use 100, and we have a lot of people who use 0. So there's no right or wrong, but I personally like to have a bit of resistance on the climbs. I think if I weren't racing Premier League, I'd probably go for 30 to 40. But I don't have an issue at all. You just have to think about the hills coming up and think about your gear choice based on that.
That's interesting. That you have people who run at 100 and people who run it at 0. I know personally, I like the resistance. I usually leave mine around 75%, and I do have a choice I did have a choice when racing in the community division leagues. I don't race there anymore, but I think unless you guys have anything else to add, we're gonna open it up to any questions in the chat. I don't see any quite yet, but we can wait about a minute. For anybody who's watching currently, you can leave your questions in the chat for the pros. And if you're watching and thinking about signing off, then if you don't mind giving us a like if you enjoyed this, and even a subscribe if you're going to come back next week for more info. Just wait a little bit and see if there are any questions that pop up. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to add in the meantime, or is that about it?
I wouldn't add too much more. The only thing I think we didn't cover that much was maybe the intermediate sprint itself, and how you target that. And I think the key is you can make it a lot longer than it looks because of the hill beforehand. And you can use the momentum of the downhill to come through with speed. So there's lots to think about, but the key is practice, learning what works, learning the actual sprint itself. And obviously a lot of people have got a lot of benefit of that today on this group ride. But learning how you get to the finish line first is not necessarily a case of going longest leading out, but it's timing and where you put your effort. So.
All right, perfect. It looks like we don't have any questions in chat, so that's fine. Before we go, I want to say thank you, as always, to Wahoo Le Col, all the organizers of this event, and our red and yellow beacons. And then, of course, thank you to both Zoe and Adam for all of the awesome advice. Do you guys want to say goodbye to the listeners?
Yeah, bye guys. Hopefully see a lot of you racing on Monday and Tuesday, and just good luck. I know you all do amazing. So yeah, hope this has cleared some things up for people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully, tricks can help you out and make you think more about how you race. That's what we're here for.
All right.
Yeah, thanks very much, Cade.
And thank you, Cade.
Yep. Thanks, guys. All right.